Welcome to the 216th
Recording in
Star Valley Ranch
progress.
Town Council meeting. I hereby call this Town Council meeting November 20, 2022, the 16th at exactly 6 p.m. We do have all councilmen in attendance and we can conduct business. Let the record show that we also have Town Clerk Kristen Gray in attendance, sorry. Could everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to welcome some special guests, and as I fall off my chair here, we have two people that I'd like to stand so we can recognize them, and that's both Council-elect Kristen Merrill and Rue Rock. So congratulations, thank you. We also have in the audience our town engineer, Brian Willing, and also Carolyn Thacker from the Star Valley Ranch Association. A little group today. The first item of business is to, if I could get a motion to reconvene from the regular workshop from today.
I move the town of Star Valley Ranch reconvene the regular meeting of the town council.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
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 Mayor,
Yes?
I can't see you guys. Does Kristen have the camera on?
You don't get to see us today. We get to see you though.
That's a bummer.
Sorry. Did you vote yes,
Yes.
Councilman?
Yes,
Okay.
I did.
All right. Motion carries unanimously. The next item on the agenda is to adopt the regular agenda, but first, is there anything from the consent agenda that anyone would like pulled forward? Hearing none, could I get a motion to adopt the agenda?
I move we adopt the agenda as written.
Second?
I'll
A second.
Councilman Bailey, what's first? It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Hearing none opposed, motion carries. Next item on the agenda is to adopt the consent agenda. Can I get a motion?
Yeah, I move we adopt the consent agenda as written.
Second?
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
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 Hearing none opposed, motion carries. Next item on the agenda is the prior business. Nope, is the Jones Simpkins, sorry, number 7. And so, is he on?
Yes.
Okay, so who's on, Andy?
Yeah,
Welcome.
here.
Welcome. There you are.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. So we're going to let you take over and talk about our audit, which is pretty exciting.
Awesome. Yeah, no, happy to talk about the audit and for just to introduce myself, my name's Andy Hernandez. I'm the partner on the audit. I've been with the firm for 14 years now, so been doing auditing all my adult life, so exciting stuff. So I'm probably gonna turn off my camera as I share the financial statement draft because I'm gonna be looking over at my other screen here that's got my agenda on here so I don't go off the rails. So let me just share that and let's see, I'll share this screen and I will say, can you guys all see that?
No.
No, we just see you.
I still see you.
Still see me? Let me figure this out. Technological difficulties, right? That's always fun.
Okay.
Let's see. Let's see. So we still see me. Let's see if how do I stop my video? Stop video. Okay, and then I'll just share screen 1. Share, and then that should, are you seeing that now? The draft?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So first up, I just want to say that, the firm is very grateful for the opportunity to be the auditors for the town of Star Valley Ranch. We really enjoy our professional relationship with with the Mayor Byers and with Kristen and with Wade. We really appreciate the opportunity to be the auditors. And yeah, we're really grateful for the opportunity. And so I just want to start off by just giving you a little background. This year, as has been the case in the last 3 years, Wade Hershey was involved and provided the consulting to basically get the books essentially from the cash basis to the accrual basis, right? The town essentially operates on a cash basis throughout the year, and then Wade comes in between subsequent to year end before we get in there to do the audit and gets the books to the accrual basis for us. So all of our adjustments, we didn't propose any material adjustments or any significant adjustments above and beyond what Wade, when we get there, he's provided some adjustments. We did, however, we still do make on our side, all the GASB, we call them GASB entries or drafting entries to get these financial statements in accordance with the GASB, which is the Governmental Accounting Standards Board's financial reporting framework. So we have to make certain entries to get the financials in accordance with that framework, but Wade makes the other accruals, you know, more the day-to-day accruals, I would say, to get the accruals on the books and get a start on the audit. So I just want to breathe a little bit of life first into what goes into an audit. There's a lot of work that goes into an audit. There's we tie out every asset, every liability, every equity account. Essentially, the balance sheet, we tie all those material balance sheet accounts out from the trial balance to source documentation. Some of that source documentation includes confirmations with third parties, so we can confirm all the cash, debt, and investments with third parties to make sure those amounts that they send back to us confirm, tie right back to your trial balance. We test certain transactions all the way down to the source doc. For example, we test the big draw requests on fixed asset additions for water supply projects. We'll actually look at the draw requests from the engineering firms. We'll test down the source documentation on certain invoices and purchases if they're material and they meet our scope. So we do drum all the way down to the details of transactions, certain transactions. The other thing we do, which I believe provides a lot of value, is we identify based on volume what we consider to be significant transaction classes, like payroll or transaction classes where the town produces a lot of volume, so disbursements, receipts, and we pick individual transactions. So we pick, for example, an individual check that was written, a cash disbursement, and we'll trace that transaction all the way through the process, from origination to recording in the GL, in the trial balance, to make sure that all the processes and controls that the town has as part of its policies and procedures are in place. So we trace a few transactions all the way through the transaction cycle and ensure that all those procedures and controls and different steps are in place and that they're functioning as intended. So, and we do provide an opinion on that, on internal controls and financial reporting, on internal controls over financial reporting, along with the audit report. So that's just some of what goes into an audit. So a lot of work involved, but definitely value added, I think, for the town. Sorry, my voice has been a little scratchy, so I'm gonna be drinking a little bit just to make sure I'm not getting too scratchy. So as we look through the financial statements, I'm just gonna click through.
Andrew,
Yeah.
can we make a request that you make them bigger so that we can see them?
Yeah, okay, yeah, let's do this. Let's hide this. And I think if I do this, does that make it bigger?
Nope, plus sign in the circle.
Right, how about this? Is that bigger?
No.
Go up to the top. and
Circle at the top,
percentages.
there's a plus and a minus. Click on the plus.
Right next to where
Circle
it says 54.1 to the
Oh, yeah.
left of that.
Oh, I see. Yeah, we can get this bigger. Like that?
Yes, perfect, thank you.
Okay, 100%. And so I will say that when I sent the draft, just on the front side, when I sent the draft to Kristen last night, I also sent it to a concurring partner. Our quality control policy at the firm is that when we have a second partner apart from the engagement, just do a quality control review of it. And so there are some minor changes on my draft that I'm showing than what that partner had suggested edits, but they're minor and fairly benign. So I'm going to use this draft version that I have, which is updated with his comments. And so anyways, if you notice a couple of minor differences, that's why there are some minor differences, but nothing major. So But a couple of things I wanted to highlight. We have, here's the table of contents. We'll go through this in some kind of at a high level because just for time constraints and, we don't want to make everyone fall asleep today. So we will go through it in painstaking detail, but we'll go through some highlights. I've just identified a few things and a few items that I think are worth mentioning to the town council and town citizens, whoever's concerned parties. But as I go through this presentation, please stop me and slow me down if you have questions or, feel free to interject with any commentary or any questions you may have. So first thing I want to highlight is there has been, this year there was a lot more changes that affected the town than typically there are. So one of the first changes is we provide 2 reports for the town. We give this first opinion, this first report, and this report is, I call this the report on the financial statement. So here we're going to identify a few opinion units, governmental activities, business type activities, and major funds of the town of Star Valley, and we're going to provide an opinion if we feel like those funds, those 3 opinion units are materially correct, which we do. Which meaning we don't believe there's any material modifications that need to be made to the financial statements. So there was a new statement on accounting standards, SAS 134, that was required to be implemented this year. And in that SAS, it made some pretty wholesale changes, quite honestly, to this auditor's report. So if you were looking at last year's, you may notice that this audit report is quite different. The first change they made was to put the opinion first, which I think is a good change. So you'll see right here, we define our opinion units and make our opinion, or state our opinion on the materially correctness of the financial statements and of those opinion units. So it's a clean opinion, meaning unmodified. So we don't believe that there's any modifications that need to be made to the financial statements. The next part that they've added, which I believe is a good addition, is I kind of highlighted them. There's a lot more clarity and a lot more, there's a lot more required detail that needs to be made with this new audit report. And it's mainly as it speaks to the town and the town's responsibilities for the financial statements, and then our responsibilities, auditors, for the financial statements. So one of the new additions is right here that I've highlighted, and it basically states that we're required to evaluate, and the town is as well, whether we notice any events or conditions that raise doubt about the town's ability to continue as a going concern. Now, typical accounting people, we make this harder than we need to. So it sounds bad being, determining whether there's doubt about the town's ability to continue as a going concern, but being a going concern is a good thing. So what a going concern means is that you believe that the town, we believe that you're a going concern, we believe that you have the wherewithal and the ability to make all your obligations and debt repayments and everything in the next 12 months, or 12 months beyond the date of these financial statements in this case. So what we've added, because we were required to, we've added a statement saying that right down here that we agree that the town is a going concern and that it will be able to meet all its financial obligations in the upcoming year. So that is an addition. This whole section here is an addition where we specifically state our responsibilities. We talk about, there's new language here, some clarity about reasonable assurance which is what an audit provides, and how reasonable assurance differs from absolute assurance. So in other words, we state, just to summarize it, we state that we're going to perform our audit in accordance with government auditing standards and do everything we can in our power to provide reasonable assurance. But if there's forgery and fraud and stuff, it may make it so our opinion is incorrect if those things are there and management doesn't, and they're not identified, right? So it just goes in and discusses what our responsibilities are, what we're going to do in the audit as we perform the audit. So some good changes, I believe, but the report looks much different than last year. It's just because of the new requirements as part of a new accounting standard update that came out and required us to add more to our report. So long story short, the report is still clean. It still says that, there's no material modifications necessary. And we also shed further light on other additional information that's required, such as the going concern that we talked about. So, but the rest of this would look very similar to last year. So new report, and that's why it looks different. So this last paragraph just talks about we issue another report on internal control, and that's referenced later. So the other thing I want to discuss for a minute is just the volume. So the standard setter for governmental accounting is called the GASB, like I mentioned earlier. And the GASB, their whole job is, there's a governing body, and they kick out standards and statements that if it applies to your organization or in this case, the town, we have to adhere to, right? So when I started, we were talking about this, me and the guys at the office, that I remember statement 54, GASB statement 54. So we refer to them internally as statements, like statement 54. Well, they're up to over 100 now. So they've been super busy in the 14 years I've been around. So, and they're only getting busier. So this year there was 7 new standards that they issued that were applicable for this year, for this fiscal year that we're auditing, 2 of which affected our financial statements of the town here. So we'll talk about those in great detail because they've changed they're the biggest changes. Most of the other reporting requirements and items within the financials are pretty much a carryover from last year and pretty status quo. So that's why I wanted to highlight some of them. One of the first standard was statement 89, which was on construction period interest. We had a note last year in our financial statements that basically said, if there's interest incurred during a construction period on debt instruments, as the town's undergoing some construction project, that you could capitalize that interest. Well, that standard statement 89 took that requirement away, and now you just expense it. You don't capitalize as part of the fixed asset addition. So all it really affected in your draft was I took that paragraph out from the prior year because it was no longer applicable. But now the other statement that was applicable this year, statement 87, leases, is probably the biggest statement in many years. And that's why I want to highlight it in the presentation today. Took quite a bit of work, quite honestly, to get these financial statements in accordance with that new statement 87. The genesis of that statement, or the impetus behind the statement, was for years, if the town entered into an operating lease, and I won't go into too many details so you don't get bored with tears, but if the town entered into an operating lease, that lease would only show up in the notes. It wouldn't show up on the balance sheet or the statement of net position. It wouldn't show up anywhere in the numbers. It would just show up back in a narrative form in the notes. Well, you can thank the airlines for the standard, but they found that a lot of people, like Delta Airlines, for example, was kind of the big offender, is what I'm told. They had all these planes, fleet of planes, but there would be no assets on the balance sheet or on the statement of net position related to these planes. It just showed up back in the footnotes in the back under operating leases, because the writers of these leases became very creative and very good at writing them as operating leases. Therefore, they never had to show up as an actual asset. And so Delta had all these planes, but no assets. Well, of course, people were like, where's all the planes? Where's all the assets? So thanks to that, it's been rolled out to private companies starting this next year. SEC companies had to do it last year, but now government, right in the middle, this year we had to implement it. So what we had to do is statement 87 was retrospectively applied back to 7-1. So the town had 4 leases, operating leases for different equipment. One of them was a copier. The other ones, so you identify a lease. Just back step a second. We identify a lease, an operating lease for copiers or equipment or whatever it may be. And if the lease is longer than 12 months, so more than a year in duration, we have to adhere to this standard now. So what essentially happens, and I'll make this as non-complex as I can and be brief. So what we have to do is we have to look at all the leases. Once we identify we have a lease, which there was 4 of them that, like I said, that the town had, we say, okay, well, these are longer than 12 months. We look at the terms, and as of 7-1, we had to look at every lease, even that was in effect before 7-1, and say, okay, as of 7-1, for example, it was a 36-month lease. And at 7/1, there was 24 months left. We had to record this asset as of 24 months. So what it required is you got all your leases. Once you figured them all out, you established a value of those leases, the right to use those assets, and you recorded a right to use asset based on the present value of the future payments. So when we go through this, you'll see that now what it's resulted in is we have an asset called a right of use asset, and we have a corresponding lease liability, which just says, okay, you have these assets that were previously your operating leases. We brought them in. They're on the balance sheet now, the statement of net position. And we have a corresponding lease liability, which is almost a direct, they're almost one for one, but not quite, because you amortize the asset over a straight line method, wherein you record the liability based on the payments that are made. So there's a small trivial difference, but in substance, now those leases, the right to use those assets on these operating leases for road graders or copiers, whatever the town has, those are now on the balance sheet as a right of use asset, and there's a lease liability. So pretty big standard change, and we've got the town in accordance. We followed the implementation guide. The GASB does kick out implementation guides when they have a new standard like this. And this, like I said, there's been trainings on this for several years. It's kind of the biggest standard in the last 5 or 10 years, in my opinion. So we followed that pretty much in lockstep, and we put those on the books and made sure that you guys, the town's records are in accordance with that new standard. So that was the big changes to the report and to in implementing this GASB 87 lease standard that I wanted to highlight. Was kind of the biggest project we had that was different than the regular audit that we've done over the years. So, okay, enough of my soapbox. I'm going to go through this now and be pretty brief. But as I've said in the past, the MD&A is if I had 10 minutes to read the financial statements and I was a user of the financials and I wanted to read them, I would spend my 10 minutes reading the MD&A. It's a really nice Reader's Digest version of the town and what's going on. And it's the only place in all the financial statements in a government financial statement where it's comparative years. So I've got a couple of things I want to highlight here in the MD&A, and then you can read these at your leisure. And I also will say, if anyone gets reading these financial statements, any town council member or any concerned citizen, you have additional questions that I don't cover in my presentation, feel free to contact Kristen or the mayor and get my contact information. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Because we're gonna go over this kind of quickly. So as we go through, I have a couple highlighted items here. So like I said, it's the only place, the management's discussion and analysis, where we have comparative information. So as you can see, some of the highlights here, the capital assets have gone up. The business type activities is the water fund for the town. We only have one fund in that activity, and we only have the general fund here. So not much change in capital assets in the general fund, but in the business type activities, we did have another $1 million or so spent on water supply improvement projects, which is now the 2021 project, is what we're calling it, the town. So that's why the increase there. It's actually not as much activity as there has been over the years. Usually, there's been bigger projects going on and starting new projects when there's funding available. And so it's kind of slowed down a little bit, but that would be expected as all the phases come to a conclusion here. So yeah, there's the town has made a big effort to improve the capital assets and infrastructure of the town, which I think is very important. Still making those improvements. And then I wanted to highlight here in the statement of activities here, kind of the income statement, if you will, the charges for services has gone up quite a bit. And that's something that we've talked about over the years that is good, because there's debt repayments that are coming, more debt repayments, or the town has more debt repayment obligations than ever before, as all these other phases of the water supply improvement project have concluded. So that's something that I still think the town needs to evaluate every year and make sure, and I know they do, they're actively monitoring the charges for water fees so that we can cover those debt repayment obligations. So it has increased another, 150,000 or so, which is good. Another note I wanted to highlight here was, if you were looking at the governmental activities statement of that position, you notice that it went up by approximately 470,000. And some of that was expenditures increased and revenues also increased to offset it, but a lot of that was because we had to implement that GASB 7 standard that I talked about. We had to, at the fund level, record an entry to increase capital outlay by $310,000 to get that right of use asset on the books at the fund level. So anyways, a little bit accounting nerdy there, but that's why this is kind of artificially inflated by a change in accounting principle. So, let's see, some more highlights I want to make on this MD&A. Once again, just this is I like this paragraph where it talks about the town, its investment in capital assets is up to about 26 million, which shows citizens and everybody in the town has made it a priority to keep investing in the infrastructure of the town. And most of that is related to water supply improvement projects and another, capital assets and infrastructure, but primarily it's water supply projects. So I think that's just a good mark for the town there to show how much they're spending on improvements. I left this in here. This comment we added last year. It was presented to us by Boyd Sidaway, the former mayor, and I just think it still provides a lot of value, so I left it in here. The reason why I like it is it just talks about that the water fund is cash and restricted cash to make future debt service payments. If you were to look at last year's, it's actually gone up. So we've gone through another year, and we still have more. I think it went up, not much, maybe like 100,000 or so from last year, but it's still gone up. We still have $2.6 million just in the water fund. That's not including the general fund where we can make future debt service payments. So that's a note I thought was worth keeping in there, and I left it in this year. So let's see. Yeah, that's the MD&A. So like I said, if I had 10 minutes, I'd read through that section to get a nice overview of the town and its activities and upcoming projects and that sort of thing. The rest of this information is the basic financial statements. So we'll have the statement of net position right here, which is like the balance sheet. Then we'll have the statement of activities. And then we'll have like 40, 50 pages of notes that are required disclosures, which just breathe more life into these amounts that you see here. So I won't go into those notes in very much detail. And I don't want to take all night on it. So I'll probably gloss over or look at this at 35,000 feet the rest of the way at a high level. So, but do stop me if you have any questions. Some things I wanted to highlight in the statement of net position is just the strong cash position that the town is in. We've got, between restricted cash and pooled cash and cash equivalents, $5 million. Now that's a very strong cash position, and we know some of that will be used in the future with other capital improvement projects and debt repayment obligations and that sort of thing. But that's a very strong position for the town. It's a very good financial indicator. So I just want to highlight that. This COVID, this unearned revenue represents some COVID monies or ARPA funding that we haven't spent yet, but it's available. So we also have another $280,000 that can be spent once we identify projects that are eligible under ARPA funding. That's what that. If anyone's wondering what unearned revenue is, like how can the town have unearned revenue? That's what it is. It's ARPA funding or COVID funding. So that's sitting in an account. We haven't used it yet. We will once we identify what to use it on. This net position, which if you were thinking about a private company, is equity essentially. It shows, where the town sits right now. And unrestricted means it's monies that hasn't been earmarked for anything or committed or assigned to any future projects. So the town has, $3.8 million. So once again, very strong net position, good funding available, at the town. So unrestricted net position just means equity and available resources there. They're not earmarked for anything. If we look through the statement of activities, I didn't highlight anything there. This is likened to an income statement in a private company. Next, we move on to the governmental funds. So the previous statements were the entity-wide, showing the water fund and the general fund. These statements are just the balance sheet alone for the general fund and just showing those resources. So they would show up in the column in the previous entity-wide balance sheet. Once again, it's got some different fund balances. That's a strong unassigned fund balance. This committed fund balance section went up quite a bit from last year, but that was, those committed fund balance are funds that are assigned by the town council by resolution at the highest level of the governing body, so the town council in our case. And those have been committed to future projects, mostly road rehabilitation. If you're wondering, what have we committed a ton of money to? It's road rehabilitation projects for the most part, primarily. So that number went up, but that just means there was more resolutions passed to commit those funds to those projects. So that's what's happened there. If you were looking at last year's and said, oh, that jumped quite a ways, that was why. These next couple slides are really just the reconciliation pages to show you how we got from the fund level, which is considered modified accrual basis of accounting, all the way up to the full accrual basis. So I'm not going to go into detail on these reconciliation pages, but there's just things that are expensed at the fund level, but they're capitalized at the entity-wide level, or there's debt amounts that are expensed, like debt payments at the fund level, they're just expensed. Then you get to the entity-wide level, and you have to report those as long-term debt obligations. So that's what these reconciliations are doing. This is the governmental fund income statement, and then a reconciliation from the income statement for the fund level income statement to the entity-wide again. And then this proprietary fund is your water fund. It's the only proprietary fund in the town, and it's meant to be ran like a business to turn net income and to turn a profit. And so it'll look a little bit different than the general fund, but it's just this is the balance sheet for the water fund. As you can see, we've already highlighted the highlights back on the entity-wide balance sheet. So operating revenues for the water fund, operating income was $314,000. So these grants are the funding we got to do the water supply 2021 project in the current year. So that's the funding from SLIB that's still available. Some of that's still available from that project, and that's where that's coming from. Interest expense. So we still added another $803,000 to equity. This change in net position just increased our net position from 14.2 million in the water fund to 15 million. So looking very healthy still, but like I said, you still want to be, as a town council, as part of your stewardship, just making sure that we feel like the charges for services and water fees are gonna be adequate as going forward, which I think the town's doing a great job of, and that's why we're adding to equity here. This is a proprietary fund cash flow statement. It's required in a proprietary fund, but really just showing the ins and outs from operating activities and finance activities and those kind of cash flow activities on the proprietary fund on the water fund. I didn't have anything highlighted there in particular. Let's see. The next section are the notes. And like we talked about, the notes just are meant to breathe more life into the amounts you already saw in the financial statements. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on the notes. Most of the notes are boilerplate required disclosures that keep getting rolled forward year over year as they're required to be. So I do have a couple highlighted, and it'll be the last piece of my presentation, but I do have a couple highlighted that did change. And that's, for the most part, if I don't highlight it, they're pretty much the same as the year before. So I have highlighted here, there's a lot of definitions in these notes, a lot of different disclosures, but like I said, all required. Let's see, right here, these leased assets now, this is all new. We've added this right of use assets, like we talked about, to adhere to GASB 87. We talked about how we measure those assets. I've already gone into great detail at the beginning of my presentation about these items here, and it continues right through here. So that's just breathing more life, essentially saying what I already told you about how we identified the leases and how we established those assets for those operating leases. What I want to highlight here is you'll notice in note 2, I had to add this note this year, and it just says there was a change in accounting principle. Once again, with that extensive standard 87, we had a change in accounting principle on how we accounted for leases, and therefore I had to add this note saying we had a change in accounting principle. It didn't result in any This last line, this is the adoption of the standard resulted in no change to beginning equity or net position. That's all that's saying is, if we had well, I don't want to go into too much detail, but had we had a capital leased asset that we identified now as GASB 87 lease, we could have had an issue where that was materially different and we would have had to have a restatement. We didn't have that, so there's no restatement to the prior year financial statements as part of this implementation of the change in accounting principle. So that's what that's saying. The rest of these notes are going to look pretty similar. I only wanted to highlight one more thing just down here in note 5. And it is just to show you that as part of the capital assets in the governmental activities in the general fund, you do see this right of use asset now. So that was the quantified amount of those leases that we added to the books as of 7/1, right? So the original amount would have been a little bit higher than that, but we were only required to restate back to 7/1. So that's about $310,000. So we added that asset, and there's a lease liability it's about 300. It's like 280,000. So almost 1-for-1 change there. And then, just like any other depreciable item, it'll get depreciated straight line over the life of the lease, and that's why we're having depreciation here. So all this was the depreciation for 2022 for those assets that we established, and it'll just continue to depreciate until the lease term ends, and then just like anything else, it'll be fully depreciated. So we've got a couple other notes I won't go into detail on them that we had to add. We'll talk about GASB Statement 87 again. I think there's one more note. Oh yeah, so we also had to add one more item showing the future repayments on those leases. So that's what this note is saying. It's just saying, hey, and that's what the lease liability was, that $275,000. So we're just saying, hey, over time, we got to make principal and interest payments each of these next 5 years until these leases run out. We have to make these payments on those now identified GASB 87 leases. So that's the main highlights I wanted to give and discuss with the town. The rest of these notes, like I said, they would just be updates from prior years and just required disclosures. They would tie back, any of these amounts here would tie back to the long-term liabilities as reflected in the statement of net position. So let me see. I think at the very end, this just breaks out your fund balance. Let me go down here again. There's like 10 pages on the retirement plan, WRS, and that was a standard we had implemented a few years back. That was probably the biggest standard since this 87, in my opinion. So but those are updates for current year numbers. Interestingly enough, as of December 31, that's the measurement date for the WRS pension liability. It actually went down. Now it's probably gone up because the market hasn't done so hot. So if you were to look at the measurement date on December 31, 2022, when they remeasure again, they just remeasure annually. It's probably going to be quite a bit higher. I don't know. That's my prediction. So that gets us through the notes. The only other thing I wanted to discuss was we've got, these are just required schedules here. We've got one more report on if we identified any findings. Right here, starting on page 64, we have governmental audit reports. And so this is our report saying we report and give an opinion on internal control or financial reporting and based on an audit in accordance with the government auditing standards. So had we noticed any control deficiencies or material weaknesses in the town's controls or financial reporting, we would report those here. And we did not, right here, this paragraph is talking about how we did not identify any deficiencies. So between what Kristen does day to day, and she's doing a great job at the town, and what Wade does as a consultant and that value he provides to come in and clean up the books before we get in there to perform the audit, that there's no material weaknesses of the town and there's no significant deficiencies that we identify. And then right here, we report on compliance. So had we found any findings with provisions on different laws or grant agreements or contracts, we would have had a finding there, but like we said here, the results disclose no instances of non-compliance. So clean reports, clean compliance reports, the town's in great shape. Like I said, no issues or no findings that we found. These last 2 pages just say that. They come right out and say it. any findings? None. And then right here, if you had findings, you'd have to submit a corrective action plan, but we don't have any findings. So that'll do it for my presentation. Unless there is any questions out there. I don't know if there's any questions or not.
No, I don't.
And no questions? We do not have any questions, thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Like I said, I will say that I feel like the town is running very smoothly, and Kristen's doing a fantastic job. So, and sorry to get a little long-winded, but I did want to breathe some life into that new accounting standard. So,
No, thank you very much. We sure appreciate all your work.
yeah, all right. And like I said, if anyone does have any other questions that are more detailed or specific, please reach out to Kristen. She has my contact information. I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
So I assume, Kristen, this will be on our website once you get this final?
Yes,
And the council will be able, they'll have plenty of time to go through it again?
yes.
Okay, before we submit it to the state. Before we submit it to the state. Okay,
So Mayor, are we gonna formally send this to our FAB and ask them to look at it?
yeah, they usually get a copy of it also.
Okay. we
Yeah,
need to do that.
they usually get a copy of it, finance also.
We need to do that.
Yeah, we'll make sure they get a copy. And then we have to have it into the state
Financial.
before January.
We have to have it into the
Before
state.
January. So it has to be submitted to the,
Yeah, you have to submit it to the Department of Audit,
Yeah.
and so, I usually, when you guys finalize it and approve it, then I'll make the final PDF version, and I usually just send it on to my contact there. We do a ton of, our firm does a lot of work with Wyoming, and so I have a contact there at the Wyoming Department of Audit.
okay.
And I just send him a copy, and, that way he's got it, and, yeah, but it's required by December 31st.
Right. They remind us if we don't get it in, trust me.
Right.
So
Yeah,
your,
they-
so your submittal is the formal submittal from the town?
Yeah, so what I do is I sent the draft to Kristen yesterday, and I just asked if there were any questions, and so, I don't know if you guys are gonna, sometimes you guys approve the financial draft in this meeting, sounds like you guys wanna forward it on to somebody, but once we all parties in agreement, I'll officially report, date it on that date, and then, in the past, Greg would send it on to the Department of Audit, but then I just would send on the PDF and copy the mayor and Kristen on that email.
Okay. Well, yeah,
But whatever you guys wanna do on that front, we can, if you guys wanna submit it, that's fine, and you can just CC me on it, so I know it's submitted.
Okay.
To the Department of Audit.
all right. Yeah, we'll have you submit it, but we'll
Okay.
get back to you once the
Yeah, we'll
council's
have you
actually
submit
spent some time with it. so.
We'll get back to you once the
Okay,
council.
sounds good.
spends some
Okay.
time with it.
Thank you very much.
Okay, sounds good. Yep, I'll just jump off if you guys have any other questions for me.
Okay, I think we're good.
Yep, I'll just jump off. Okay, awesome, thank you.
Okay, I think we're good.
Okay, awesome,
Trying to get our,
Hold it from mine to yours.
Trying to get our,
Drop it to
it's the cord, it's always up here.
it's the cord, it's always up here.
Plug it back in.
you don't want much, do you?
We're gonna try to get this up and running, sorry about that.
Try to get this.
Oh, there you go, see? Fantastic.
Oh,
All
there you
right.
go. See?
So now we're going to private, prior
All right.
business.
So now
Ordinance
we're going to private,
2022-15.
prior business. Ordinance
Councilman Hanson, I will apologize to stay
2022-15.
ahead of time, but he's
Councilman
in charge of all of
Hanson, I
these
will
road
apologize
closures.
to stay ahead of time.
So here we go.
In charge of all of these road
Okay,
closures.
this is the
So here we
third
go.
reading of title, this is the 11 business regulation title, chapter 113, short-term rentals. Chapter 113, third reading. And there's no change from the second reading, but what this reading is doing is adding some verbiage to both the requirement to short-term rental owners, and it's all been precipitated by problems that we run into. And so one deals with requiring the short-term rental owner to have local representative living in Star Valley local to respond to complaints from neighbors within 300 feet of the boundary. Within 300 feet of the boundary. Then there's also one around the revocation of a permit. Initially, it was just, the good cause was restricted to fraud in the application. And we've added some verbiage that the possibility that multiple documented failures of the local representative to respond to incidents could also lay the foundation for good cause. Because we had other issues, we had to stiffen up the penalty for those who were operating without a permit. And so instead of it now is $750 for the first notice that we give them of operating without a permit. After 14 days, if they want to keep offering the short-term rental, and still haven't applied for a permit, then they will have to, there's a mandatory court appearance. And that doesn't do the trick. We then have a third offense would be not only a court appearance, but the penalty of not being able to apply for a short-term rental permit for another year. Since there's no changes to that, and with that explanation, I move the town of Star Valley Ranch approve the third reading of ordinance 2022-15, Title 11, Business Regulations, Chapter 113, Short-Term Rental Permits as written.
Second.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any questions from the audience on this? It's been moved and seconded. Any questions from the audience? Councilman? Oh,
How soon can you start issuing
Councilman.
citations?
Good days,
10 days after the third reading passes.
good days.
10 days after the third reading passes.
No question.
Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 None. All opposed, motion carries. Next item on the agenda is ordinance 2022-16, and this one is the municipal bond schedule. And this one is the municipal bond
This
schedule.
would be chapter 35, title 3, chapter 35. Because we changed the language in the ordinance that I just read, we had to change or add language in the title 3, chapter 35 to reflect the changes that we have made. Now operating without a permit is, as I stated, $750 for the first offense, operating without a permit, court appearance for the second offense, and a court appearance for the third offense. So, since there's no changes, I move the town of Star Valley Ranch approve the third reading of ordinance 2022-15, Title 3, Administration, Chapter 35, Municipal Court, as written.
Second.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any questions from the audience?
Actually, because
It's
I
been
was,
moved and seconded.
even
Any
like the
questions?
last one, so
Yeah.
how do townspeople know
Even like the last one.
that an
So,
ordinance
how
has
do
been created and
townspeople
passed, and
know
now this is the new law?
That an ordinance has been created and passed.
Two ways,
and
they
now
come
this
to
is
council
the new law.
meeting. So let me, the process, it takes 3 months to pass a law. And then once it's passed, it takes 10 days for it to go into effect.
And then once it's passed,
everything is
it
on
takes
the
10 days for it
webpage.
to go into effect, so.
The
So
actual
there's a couple-
website.
Yep, everything is on the website.
Okay.
Actually, all of our
Actual
websites.
website.
Yep, everything is on.
So maybe if we ever
Actually,
meet
all of
about,
our
you and I,
So
Mayor
maybe
Dyes,
if we
about,
ever meet about.
promotion of social media
Mayor
stuff,
Dyes
we could
about,
talk about how we
promotion of
could
social
make that more
media
visible.
stuff. We could
Okay.
talk about.
Yeah, we'd be glad to
how
do
we
that.
could
It also
make
has
that
to
more
be posted.
visible.
Okay.
In the
Yeah,
building.
it has to be, yeah.
Places.
I mean, the law says it has to be posted in the town clerk's office
Yeah,
for 10 days.
I mean, the law says it has to be posted in the town clerk's office.
But we do it downstairs. I mean, we try to.
But I,
get
you
it
know, I'm
out.
thinking
We
more
do it
just like the,
downstairs.
just in case you didn't know.
But I, you know.
Yeah.
I think
Yes,
this
you may
is
want-
just in case you didn't know.
Yeah, no, I think that,
This is
because we do
true.
hear that quite often. Why?
Yeah, no, I think that, because we do
So,
hear that quite often.
But then we do have some responsibility to understand what the laws are, so.
But then we do
It
have some
goes both
responsibility
ways.
to understand.
But yeah, I think that would be great.
Yes, it goes both
I
ways.
will appreciate your
But
help.
yeah, I think that would be great.
Okay, any other questions? No?
No?
All in favor, say
Okay,
aye.
any other questions?
Aye. Hearing none
Aye.
opposed?
All in favor, say aye.
Hearing none opposed, motion
Aye.
carries. Next
Hearing
item
none
on the
opposed.
agenda is
Hearing none opposed,
ordinance
motion carries.
2022-18.
Is
Ordinance Councilman Hanson?
2022-18.
2022-18, Title V Public Works, 22- Chapter 54 rates. Chapter 54, there's no change from the first reading to the second. Change. This is just reflects an increase in the operating costs and loan payment projections. Operating costs and loan payment. The base fee for just residential within corporate limits went from 62 to 64, within corporate limits, and in areas 1 through 5 it went up to 80. Areas 1 through 5 went up. And the commercial also went up accordingly based on the service size. And for the service availability fee, in the residential availability, 23 to 25 dollars a month. 23 to 25. Commercial went up to $43.75. Since there was no changes from first reading to second reading, I move the Town of Star Valley Branch approve the second reading of ordinance 2022-18, Title V Public Works, Chapter 54 rates, as written.
Second?
Rates.
Been moved and seconded.
Second?
On this particular one,
Been moved and
Casey had
seconded.
an excellent question.
On this particular
The,
one, Casey
The
had an
water we
excellent
actually put in the newsletter.
The water we
may
actually
want to
put in
consider
the
adding. We used to have ordinance under review section of the newsletter.
Consider adding. We used to have ordinance in the review.
But this one we do get out because we should change rates at this time.
But this one we do get
We want
out.
people to
because we
know
change
that the rates are
at
going to
this
change in
time.
January, so.
We want people to know that the rates are going to change. in
Okay,
January.
any questions?
None.
Okay, any questions?
All in favor say aye.
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 All in favor say aye.
Hearing none opposed, motion
Aye.
carries.
Aye. Hearing none opposed, motion carries.
We have no new business. So the next item on the agenda is the mayor's update, and this will
So,
be pretty,
the next item on the agenda is the mayor's update, and this will be pretty quick.
Can I ask a question?
is it relative to what we're talking about?
Is it relative to what we're talking about?
Oh, not yet. Yeah, you can ask it after I get through with the
Not yet.
mayor's update.
You can
Okay.
ask it after I get through with the.
So
mayor's update.
on the mayor's update, the first thing
So,
was Monday
on the
morning we
mayor's
had
update,
a staff meeting.
The first thing was,
And
Monday
there
morning we
were
had a
several
staff
discussions.
meeting.
We talked a
And
lot
there
about
were,
citizen service and how
Several
we treat our
discussions,
citizens.
we
and-
talked a lot about
And
citizen service.
worked on
and how
some
we treat our
behavior
citizens
challenges and text messaging and
worked on
email
some
and
behavior
all of those
challenges
things. And I
text
use
messaging
Councilman
and email.
Ellis's words is
All of
that
those
if you don't
things,
want it on
and
the
I
front
use
page of the paper,
Councilman,
don't put
Ellis's
it in
words
writing.
is that if you don't want it on the front page.
So
of the paper,
anyway, I think that was an excellent meeting. And
So
we also
anyway, I think that was
identified
an excellent
some
meeting.
areas that
and,
they'll be
we
working
also
on next
identified
summer.
some areas
And that
they'll
is
be working
surface
on
water,
next,
so we know,
summer.
we've had drainage
And that
problems
is,
all over town
surface
forever,
water,
but
so we know
this
we've had drainage
Vista
problems
East,
all over
Vista
town
West,
forever,
Alpenglow,
but
Snow Forest,
this,
Spruce,
Vista
and
East,
Cedar
Vista
are
West,
kind of on the top of
Alpenglow,
their
Snow
list.
Forest, Spruce,
We also
and
spent
Cedar
some
are
time
on the top of their
updating
list.
our snow
We
plowing
also
ordinance,
spent
so
some
our
time,
snow plowing
updating our
policy.
snow
That's on our
plowing ordinance, so
webpage,
our snow
if you'd like to
plowing
read it, but we
policy.
made a few
That's
changes,
on
made it a
our
little
webpage.
easier for people
If
to
you'd
read,
like to
for
read it,
example.
we made a few
We
changes,
talked
made it a little
about
easier for
priority
people to
roads
read,
as
for
arterial
example.
roads, and not
We
everyone
talked
knows what
about
that means, so we
priority
changed
roads
it to
as
main
arterial
roads.
roads. and
Side
not everyone
roads,
knows
and
what that means,
tried
so
to
we
use
changed it to
language
main
that
roads.
most people would
Side roads,
understand.
and tried to
Probably
use
one of the big
language that
changes
most people
was,
would understand.
the
Probably
staff
one of the big
wanted,
changes
we normally
was,
was 6 inches of snow before they
the
started
staff
plowing, and they wanted it to
we
reduce
normally
to
was
4
6
inches.
inches of snow before
And
they
so,
started plowing, and they
we
wanted it to
should
reduce
place
to
the
4
plows
inches.
out more, that was
And
changed.
so,
And I'm looking at Kristen, I think those were probably the big things, since she had to change it, that is on our website.
Since she had to
And-
change it, that is on
And then
our
we talked a bit
website.
about signage on our roads, one of the things that
And then we
came
talked
up.
a bit about signage.
This came up
on
several
our roads.
times,
One of the
but
things
we
that came
fixed
up,
it is this, we have
this came up
signage
several
at our
times, but
entrances
we
of every
fixed it
entrance,
is
so we have
this-
13
we have
entrances
signage
to town.
at our
And there's all these
entrances of every
signs, and
entrance,
you've
so we have
got poles that are
13
right by
entrances
each
to
other,
town.
and nobody
And there's
reads
all
them.
these signs, and
And
you've got
it-
poles
it's
that
not
are
very
right by each
pretty.
other, and nobody
And so,
I
I think they've already finished that project. That was Monday we talked about it. Instead of having a different sign for everything like fireworks and open fires and parking, they've done some signage where you can have it all on one sign. So just trying to clean things up for the town. So that was a big thing that came up. And then one that I'm getting a million questions about is the door that goes into the mail center. The entire frame is broken. And so right now, we haven't found anyone to repair it, or they can't repair it. And so we're just trying to figure out what we're going to do with that door. Yeah, we get a lot of complaints about it, but we're working on it. It has to be a fire rated door, so it's gonna be a heavy door. And that's also a problem for some of our residents, so that's one of the big projects we're trying to fix. Identified some projects again for this summer. One of them is finished landscaping for this summer. So, the road study, update, we should have this summer, which will definitely help town council decide what roads they wanna pave or chip seal or that kind of thing, so that will definitely give us a better map. ARPA funding, I think we sent this out, but, we received 1.399 million in grant, which is a big deal. And then we had to put up about 787,000 out of reserves. A chunk of that came from the ARPA money that he was talking about. We do have a use for that money, it's going to water. And so the project is just under 2.2 million, and that is Vista. Mainly Vista, a little bit of Vista East, and up to Green Canyon. And then last thing I wanted to mention was Amendment A. We had talked about this in meeting, it passed. And now the legislature has it, because it's a change to the Constitution. So the legislature has it, and they will decide how we can invest our money. The assumption is they'll do it the same way that the state is allowed to, but it's how we can invest in equities. So, right now, we can't do that, but this gave us the opportunity, and it would be done through the state. We don't really have that much control. But, anyway, it just gives us an opportunity for those funds, the money that we have that sits in reserves to make a little bit of interest. That was a big deal to get that one done. Okay, so Carolyn, what would you like to talk about? Put you on my mayor's update. Put you on my mayor's update. No, you don't have to. You don't have to come up here. You can. It's good if you stand up though, so we can hear you. You don't have to come up here. It's good if you stand up though, so we can hear you.
I'm a walker. Anyway, there are a number of us who walk down that bridge.
Okay.
Not just me, those who
Okay.
footprints.
Okay.
And when they plowed the snow up against the barriers on the, I guess that would be the south side of the barriers.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
Mhm.
So I'm wondering
Oh,
if they
okay.
can't, and I know they have to plow that street with a truck, because they can't get a grader down there. Could they not push it to the left of those barriers? Because when the barriers were put up, there was adequate space for the walkers to go through.
So you can get through. That should.
Me and everybody else.
So you can get through. That should not be a problem. I will
I'm
ask
not
them.
the only walker.
Okay. That should not be. No, I know.
Actually, there was a stroller that went there.
No, I know. Yeah, I'm sure, that's okay. Yeah, I'll mention it to him. That should not be a big deal. Yeah, I'll mention it to him. That should not be a big deal. Let's see, I've got the upcoming events. Thanksgiving Day is November 24th, so the town hall will be closed. Thanksgiving Day is November 24th. Coffee with the mayor is December 19th, and that's at 10 a.m. And then the next town council meeting is, December 21st, sorry, thank you. The workshop is at 9 a.m. and the council meeting at 6 p.m. Could I get a motion to adjourn?
and the council meeting at 6 p.m.
Second?
Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Been moved and seconded, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Second.
Aye.
Moved and seconded, all
Aye.
in favor, say aye.